वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल डियर व्यूवर्स। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं कि क्लास 10th की हिस्ट्री टेक्स्ट बुक 2022 में रिवाइज हुई है। इस रिवाइज्ड टेक्स्ट बुक में कुछ पोर्शंस भी ऐड हुए हैं हर किसी चैप्टर में, और इसके साथ साथ कुछ क्वेश्चंस भी ऐड हुए हैं। इस वीडियो में हम आपको रिवाइज्ड टेक्स्ट बुक के क्वेश्चंस प्रोवाइड कराएंगे। चैप्टर 3 के चैप्टर का नाम है द मेकिंग ऑफ ग्लोबल वर्ल्ड। ऑलरेडी हम 2 चैप्टर्स के नोट्स आपको प्रोवाइड कर चुके हैं, और आप हमारी चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करके रखिए ताकि आपको हर बार जो भी नई चीज़ आती है वो आपको मिलती रहे, टाइमली बेसिस आपको इन्फॉर्मेशन और स्टडी मटेरियल मिलता रहे। वीडियो को स्टार्ट करते हैं। पहला क्वेश्चन जो हमारे लिए है, गिव 2 एग्जांपल्स ऑफ डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ ग्लोबल एक्सचेंजेस विच टुक प्लेस इन द 17th सेंचुरी, चूजिंग 1 एग्जांपल फ्रॉम एशिया एंड 1 फ्रॉम अमेरिकाज। 17th सेंचुरी में ग्लोबल एक्सचेंजेस जो हुए आपको वो दिखाने हैं, 2 एग्जांपल्स देनी है, एक एशिया से और एक अफ्रीका से। Answer इसका the 2 examples of different types of global exchanges which took place in the 17th century from Asia and Americas are, एशिया और अमेरिका में 2 जो ग्लोबल एक्सचेंजेस हुए, एक हम एशिया से बोलेंगे द सिल्क रूट। एशिया में जो इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग था वो था सिल्क रूट। द सिल्क रूट इज़ अ गुड एग्जाम्पल ऑफ क्रॉस कल्चरल ट्रेड एंड कनेक्टिविटी बिटवीन डिस्टेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड। द नेम सिल्क रूट पॉइंट्स टू द इम्पॉर्टेंस ऑफ वेस्ट बाउंड चाइनीज सिल्क कार्गोज along this route. अर्ली क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज ट्रैवलड दिस रूट, थ्रू दिस रूट लिख सकते हो आप, थ्रू दिस रूट टू एशिया एंड अर्ली मुस्लिम प्रीचर्स ए फ्यू सेंचुरीज लेटर। सिल्क रूट की वजह से एशिया और यूरोप कनेक्ट होता है थ्रू सेंट्रल एशिया। तो इस सिल्क रूट जो है, चाइना से सिल्क जाता था यूरोप और बाकी पार्ट्स में। अब यही सिल्क रूट है यूज़ किया था क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज से ने, वो एशिया आए थे, और फिर मुस्लिम प्रीचर जो थे उन्होंने इस्लाम फैलाया था इसी सिल्क रूट के थ्रू 17th सेंचुरी में। अगर हम देखें इससे पहले भी इस रूट से काफ़ी आइडियाज़ जो है वो शेयर हुए हैं, ट्रैवल हुए हैं, एक्सचेंज हुए हैं। दूसरी एग्जांपल, फूड फ्रॉम अमेरिकाज। द फूड्स लाइक पोटैटोज, सोया, ग्राउंडनट्स, मेज, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes, etc. were not known to our ancestors until the accidental discovery of the Americas by Christopher Columbus. These foods only made their way to Europe and the rest of the world after this monumental discovery of new continent. अमेरिका डिस्कवर होने से पहले ना यूरोप के लोग और ना ही एशिया के लोग जो है पोटैटोज़ खाते थे, सोया, ग्राउंड नट्स, मेज़, टोमेटो भी नहीं खाते थे, चिलीज़ नहीं थी, स्वीट पोटैटोज़ पता ही नहीं था। जब अमेरिका डिस्कवर हुआ तो ये फूड्स भी डिस्कवर हुए, वहाँ से फिर इन फूड्स को यूरोप पहुँचाया गया और यूरोप से फिर एशिया के लोग भी खाने लगे। दूसरा क्वेश्चन, explain how the global transfer of disease in the pre-modern world helped in the colonization of Americas. disease की वजह से कैसे अमेरिका को colonize किया गया, ये आपको लिखना है। नटशल में यही है, अमेरिका के लोग जो थे आइसोलेटेड थे काफ़ी टाइम के लिए, उनमें वो इम्यूनिटी अभी डेवलप नहीं हुई थी, उनको आदत नहीं थी स्मॉल पॉक्स जैसी डिजीज़ की। लेकिन जब यूरोप के लोग वहाँ पहुँचे तो उन्होंने अपने साथ वो बीमारी पहुँचाई स्मॉल पॉक्स की, जिसकी वजह से काफ़ी ज़्यादा लोग अमेरिका के जो नेटिव अमेरिकाज के लोग थे वो मर गए। एज ए रिज़ल्ट जब वो मर गए, कमज़ोर हो गए, लड़ने वाला वहाँ कोई बचा नहीं, और यूरोपियंस ने फिर अमेरिकाज को जो है वो कॉलोनाइज कर दिया। सिंपली यही है आंसर। The global transfer of disease in the pre-modern world helped in the colonization of the Americas. The reason was the Native Americans were not immune to the disease that the European settlers brought with them. The Europeans were to a great extent immune to effects of diseases like smallpox due to centuries of exposure, but the Native Americans had no such defense against this disease, as they were isolated from diseases नेटिव टू द ओल्ड वर्ल्ड। तो यूरोप को ओल्ड वर्ल्ड कहा जाएगा, या बाकी एशिया को भी ओल्ड वर्ल्ड कहा जाएगा, और अमेरिका जो है उसे न्यू वर्ल्ड कहा जाता है। एट टाइम्स सेटलर्स डिलिबरेटली practiced biological warfare on the natives by giving items laced with smallpox germs as gifts of friendship. तो जानबूझकर भी ये बीमारी वहाँ फैलाई गई, ठीक है, उनको इन्फेक्ट किया जाता था अमेरिका के लोगों को। The disease was far more effective in wiping out entire tribes and communities without having to resort firearms. Disease से मार डाला गया बहुत सारी communities को। Smallpox proved a deadly killer. Once introduced, it spread deep into the continent ahead even of any European reaching there. It killed and decimated whole communities, paving the way for conquest. तीसरा क्वेश्चन जो है इसके पार्ट्स हैं। राइट ए नोट टू एक्सप्लेन द इफेक्ट ऑफ द फॉलोइंग। आपको इन पे लिखना है कि इन चीज़ों का इफेक्ट क्या हुआ, इस पे आपको नोट लिखना है। आपको लिखना है ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट्स डिसीजन टू एबॉलिश कॉर्न लॉज, इसका क्या इफेक्ट पड़ा। द कमिंग ऑफ रिंदरप्रेस्ट टू अफ्रीका, इसका क्या इफेक्ट पड़ा। द डेथ ऑफ मैन वर्किंग एज इन यूरोपियन बिकॉज ऑफ वर्ल्ड वार 1, तो इसका क्या इफेक्ट पड़ा। द ग्रेट डिप्रेशन ऑन द इंडियन इकोनॉमी, इसका क्या असर पड़ा। और द डिसीजन ऑफ MNCs टू रीलोकेट प्रोडक्शन टू एशियन कंट्रीज, इसका क्या असर पड़ा। पहले हम लिखेंगे इसका। द ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट्स डिसीजन टू एबॉलिश द कॉर्न लॉज was due to the pressure from the landed groups who were unhappy with the high price of food and the cheap inflow of agricultural products from Australia and America. As a result, many English farmers left their profession and migrated to towns and cities. Some went overseas. This indirectly led to a global agriculture and rapid urbanization. दूसरा, Rinderpest, a fast-spreading disease of cattle plague, arrived in Africa in late 1880s. It had a terrifying impact on people's livelihoods and the local economy. It started in East Africa and soon spread to the other parts of the continent. Within 5 years, it reached the Cape of Good Hope, Africa's southernmost tip, by which it had killed 90% of the cattle population in that part of Africa. It spread through infected cattle imported from British Asia to feed the Italian soldiers invading Eritrea in East Africa. Using this situation to their advantage, colonizing nations conquered and subdued Africa by monopolizing scarce cattle resources to force Africans into the labor market. The Africans were forced to work for a wage due to the loss of their livelihood due to the effect of Rinderpest. Next, the death of men of working age in Europe because of World War I. The First World War was the first modern industrial war. It saw the use of machine guns, tanks, aircraft, chemical weapons, etc. on a massive scale. The scale of death and destruction was very huge. Most of the killed and maimed were men of working age, and the deaths and injuries of these men drastically reduced the able-bodied workforce in Europe. Household incomes declined after the war, thus women stepped in to do the jobs that were earlier done by men. It increased the role of women, led to a यहाँ पे है the increased it increased the role of women, which led to a demand for equal status in society. It made the feminist movement even stronger. यहाँ पे आप लिखोगे it increased the role of women, which led to a demand for equal status in society. It made the feminist movement even stronger. The Great Depression on the Indian economy. In the 19th century, colonial India had become an exporter of agricultural goods and importer of manufacturers. The impact of Great Depression in India was felt especially in the agricultural sector. It was evident that Indian economy was closely becoming integrated into the global economy. India was a British colony and exported agricultural goods and imported manufactured goods. As international prices crashed, so did the prices in India. The wheat prices in India fell by 50% between 1928 and 1934. The decision of MNCs, multinational companies or multinational corporations, to relocate production to Asian countries. Wages were relatively low in Asian countries like China. Thus, they became lucrative destinations for investment by foreign MNCs, competing to dominate world markets. It provided a cheap source of labor for markets. It also stimulated world trade and increased capital inflow in the Asian countries. Give two examples from history to show the impact of technology on food availability. Answer: technology improved transportation systems. Improved transportation systems helped the foods get delivered on time. to the markets without any harm. Faster railways, lighter wagons, and larger ships helped move food cheaply and quickly from faraway farmers to final markets. Refrigerated ships. The development of refrigerated ships enabled the transport of perishable foods over long distances. Animals were slaughtered for food at the starting point in America, Australia, or New Zealand, and then transported to Europe as frozen meat. This reduced shipping costs and lowered meat prices in Europe. The poor in Europe could now add meat to their diet, which was monotonous with only bread and potatoes. अब ये क्वेश्चन ऐड हुआ है रिवाइज्ड टेक्स्ट बुक से. रिवाइज्ड टेक्स्ट बुक में ये क्वेश्चन ऐड हुआ है. क्वेश्चन नंबर 5, ब्रीफली डिस्क्राइब द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक डिप्रेशन ऑन द इकोनॉमी ऑफ जम्मू एंड कश्मीर रीजन. इसका आंसर है द जम्मू एंड कश्मीर रीजन आल्सो हैड एन adverse economic impact of Great Depression. The agricultural prices fell. Peasants could not sell produce on good prices, hence they could not pay the fixed high land tax. It led to agrarian indebtedness. The conditions of peasants became worse. Working class of this region lost jobs, faced unemployment, food shortages, and starvation. People in industrial sector also faced severe problems. Industries like shawl, paper mache, carpet weaving, silk etc. declined. एक और क्वेश्चन जो ऐड हुआ है, दो ही क्वेश्चन इस चैप्टर में ऐड हुए हैं. एक ये वाला था जो हमने डिस्कस किया क्वेश्चन नंबर 5 शॉर्ट आंसर में, और क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 लॉन्ग आंसर में ऐड हुआ है. डिस्कस हाउ Kashmir's location on Silk Route shaped the economy and culture of this region. Kashmir occupied an important and central position on the Silk Route. It was a major trading junction on the trading route that connected India and Central Asia. The merchants, artisans, pilgrims, and adventurers mainly followed the Kokand, Kashgar, Yarkand, Leh, Srinagar route. यहाँ लेह है. They brought new ideas, skills, crafts, and knowledge which enriched the society of Kashmir. The major commodities of trade included Kashmiri shawls, fur, and carpets. These industries had a flourishing market in Central Asia and reached Europe. It was due to this Silk route that Kashmiri shawls and silk and carpets became the luxurious items in Europe and were in great demand. Next question, what is meant by the Bretton Woods Agreement? Answer, in order to preserve economic stability and full employment in the industrial world, the post-war international economic system was established. To execute the same, the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference was held in July 1944 at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, USA. The Bretton Woods Conference established the International Monetary Fund (IMF) to deal with external surpluses and shortages of its member nations. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, popularly known as World Bank, was set up to finance post-war reconstruction. It started the financial operations in 1947. Under the agreement, currencies were pegged to the price of gold, and the US dollar was seen as a reserve currency linked to the price of gold. Decision-making authority was given to Western industrial powers. The US was given the right of veto over key IMF and World Bank decisions. The Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rates. The Bretton Woods system opened an era of unique growth and trade and incomes for the Western industrial nations and Japan. Question number 3 long answer में, imagine that you are an indentured Indian laborer in the Caribbean. Drawing from the details in the chapter, write a letter to your family describing your life and feelings. Answer, dear ma and pa, or dear mother and father. Parents को लिखना है यहाँ, dear parents. My work as an indentured laborer in Jamaica is far from a walk in the park. Through this letter, I want to tell you about my life here. When the contractor hired me, he was quite economical with the truth about the living and working conditions, to say nothing of the kind of work and place of work. We have very few rights with the contractor living up to the behavior standards expecting of them in the Caribbean extremely harsh. He treats us like animals since we are a minority and thus easy targets for his wrath. Accidents are common in the sugar plantations in Jamaica. One time I saw a worker burnt alive when the liquid sugar we were boiling accidentally spilled on him. Since he cannot work with this third degree burners, the contractor saw it fit to throw him out without any due wages paid. We don't have any rights to speak or to express our dissatisfaction about the working conditions, and if we do, we will face the overseers whips. Whenever I do not attend my work, I am liable to be jailed. There is a lot of work at the plantations with a heavy workload and less time to finish it all. In case of unsatisfactory work, my wages are cut. If there is hell on her earth, it certainly is this. I know my writing will cause you anguish, but rest assured, there is the talk of new laws underway to protect laborers like us. Thus, this situation will pass soon. Question number 4 long answer में explain the 3 types of movements or flows within the international economic exchange. Find one example of each type of flow which involved India and Indians. Write a short account of it. Answer: the flow of trade in goods, example cloth or wheat. India was a hub of trade in the pre-modern world, and it exported textiles and spices in return for gold and silver from Europe. Fine cotton was produced in India and was exported to Europe. With industrialization, British cotton manufacture began to expand, and industrialists pressurized the government to restrict cotton imports and protect local industries. As a result of this, tariffs that were imposed on cloth imports, the inflow of fine Indian cotton began to decline. The flow of labor, the migration of people in search of employment. In the field of labor, indentured labor was provided for miners, plantations and factories abroad in huge numbers. In the 19th century, this was an instrument of colonial domination by the British. Indentured laborers were hired under contracts which promised return travel to India after they had worked 5 years on their employer's plantation. The living conditions were harsh, and the laborers had little protection of the law or from it, as they had little rights. The moment of capital investments. Lastly, Britain took generous loans from the USA to finance the World War. Since India was an English colony, the impact of these loan debts was felt in India too. Food and other crops for the world market required capital. Large plantations could borrow it from banks and markets. Question number 5. Explain the causes of Great Depression. Answer: the Great Depression was a result of many factors. Number 1. Agricultural overproduction was a major problem. As a result, agricultural prices fell. As prices fell, so did agricultural incomes. This increased the volume of goods in the market. The situation got worsened in the market. Prices fell down further. Farm produce began to rot due to the lack of buyers. Number 2. Prosperity in the USA during the 1920s created a cycle of higher employment and incomes. It led to a rise in consumption and demands. More investment and more employment created tendencies of speculations which led to Great Depression of 1929 up to the mid 1930s. The stock market crashed in 1929. It created panic among investors and depositors who stopped investing and depositing. As a result, it created a cycle of depreciation. Number 3. The withdrawal of US loans affected the rest of the world in many different ways. In Europe, it led to the failure of the major banks and the collapse of major currencies such as the British pound sterling. Some of the banks closed down when people withdrew all their assets, leaving them unable to invest. Some banks called back loans taken from them at the same dollar rate in spite of the falling value of the dollar. Question number 6 and last question. Explain what is referred to as G77 countries In what ways can G77 be seen as a reaction to the activities of the Bretton Woods twins? Answer. After the Second World War, many parts of the world were still under European colonial rule, and it took over 2 decades for the colonies in Asia and Africa to become free, independent nations. When they became free, they faced many other problems such as poverty, lack of resources, etc. Economies and societies were handicapped for being under colonial rule for long periods. As colonies, many of the less developed regions of the world had been part of Western empires. The policy of Bretton Woods twins tilted more in favor of the developed nations of the Western world. Now, ironically, as new independent countries were facing urgent pressures to lift their populations out of poverty, they came under the guidance of international agencies dominated by the former colonial powers. Therefore, these colonies organized themselves as a group, the Group of 77 or G77, to demand a new international economic order, or NEO, NIEO, New International Economic Order. By the NEO, they meant a system that would give them real control over their natural resources, more development assistance, fairer prices for raw materials, and better access for their manufactured goods in developed countries markets. और यहाँ पे आप लिख सकते हो in the markets, यहाँ पे आप लिख सकते हो in the markets of developed countries, या लिख सकते हो in the developed countries markets. थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग दिस वीडियो। चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करके रखिए। थैंक यू।